All right. I am really, 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 did I say really enough excited about my guest today? This is a podcast about reinvention. And today I get to interview someone who calls himself the human guinea pig, which is so cool. My guest is AJ Jacobs, whose name you probably know. He's a author and journalist and human guinea pig, as he says. He's the author of 4 New York Times bestsellers that combine memoir, science, humor, and just a little bit of self-help. His first book, which was the second book that I read by him, is called The Know-It-All, One Man's Humble Quest to Become the Smartest Person in the World. I'm going to ask him lots of questions about that. As he says, after trying to improve his mind, he turned to his spirit. He wrote The Year of Living Biblically, One Man's Humble Quest to Follow the Bible as Literally as Possible. Which is also fascinating. And then he decided to complete the mind, body, spirit connection. And he wrote the Drop Dead Healthy, One Man's Humble Quest for Bodily Perfection. AJ, welcome to Reinventability.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you, Natalie. We're both big fans of gratitude. So
Yes, we are.
thank
Actually, we're
you.
going to start there because the first
Perfect.
book that I read by you was Thanks 1,000, which was, I love the concept. So in the book, you decide to go on this quest to thank every single person involved in making your morning cup of coffee. And before I ask you about it, I just want to tell you, so this was a decade ago. When was the book out?
Yeah, that sounds
At
right.
least. And I just want to tell you, AJ, that I think of you at least a couple times a week during my morning coffee. So you and I have been really close for about a decade.
Oh, I am honored. I am grateful to
No,
be a
truly.
part of your
I think
life.
of you and I think of as you, the farmer who went and got the beans and whom I made my cup. So it really had an impact on me. So let's start there. What inspired that idea, which is so deeply beautiful?
Well, thank you. As I say, all right, I'll stop thanking because that could take up our whole conversation. But it was partly my son who was, I think, about 12 at the time. And I had read all of these studies about how important gratitude is to your health, your mental health, and even your physical health. So I knew I needed to get more gratitude in my life. So I did. I started this little ritual where I would say sort of a secular version of a prayer before a meal with my kids and wife. So I would say, I'd like to thank the uh, the person who grew the tomatoes for our spaghetti and tomato sauce, and the woman at Zingoni's Market who sold us the tomato sauce, uh, and that went on like that for a minute or two. And my son said, "Well, that's fine, but it's also kind of lame, kind of
Hmm.
half-assed, because those people, they can't hear you. So if you really were grateful, you would go out and thank them in person." And I thought, well, that is an interesting idea. Like that could be a good book. So he earned his supper that night by inspiring that book. And I went and did it. I spent 6 months and I thanked in person or over the phone or via email. I thanked over 1,000 people
Wow.
who had anything to do with I switched. They wanted me to do, my kids wanted me to do candy or something,
Of course.
or like s'mores. I went with coffee. So I thanked 1,000 people who had anything to do with my morning cup of coffee. That meant going to South America and thanking the farmers, thanking the barista, but thanking everyone in between, the truck driver who drove the coffee beans, the people who made the road for the truck driver, because
Amazing.
otherwise he couldn't. And it was a weird experience and awkward at times, but also quite lovely.
Well, I want to ask you, I have a couple questions I want to ask you about that. What was something that surprised you in doing that? Because I think
Well,
that, as you're talking about it, and when I read the book, you think oh, you come and thank people and they're super grateful. You're thanking them. But was there something that surprised you in connecting with so many people and doing that?
many things. I mean, one was just how it drove home just how many people are involved in any small thing in our lives. It could be socks, it could be pens, it could be coffee, and how there are thousands of people. The people who design the logo for my coffee shop, the people who build the ladder that my barista uses to get down the coffee. Another one was the reactions of people when I thanked them. Uh, I mean, there were a couple of people who I'd say the vast majority were happy to be thanked. Maybe you had a couple of cranky people who weren't, but I would say 98%.
Mm.
And I would say what was lovely was uh, it began sometimes as an awkward interaction, but by the end, it almost always ended up as a meaningful interaction. So, for instance, I called the woman who did the pest control for the warehouse where the coffee beans are stored, this huge warehouse with millions, literally millions of coffee beans, floor to ceiling. And I said to her, I called her up out of the blue and said, I know this is weird, but I just want to thank you for keeping the insects out of my coffee. And she said, that is weird. But she said, that is also makes my day because
Mm.
no one thanks me. And so that made my day in return.
Mhm.
It was sort of this virtuous cycle, and I left. We both left feeling better. It was sort of like an anti-crank phone call, like the opposite of a crank phone
I
call
love that.
that you would make.
I love
So
that.
I do recommend that, even though it's a little awkward.
Yeah, and you know what you're expressing, AJ, you probably know and our listeners know, I've spent a decade now teaching gratitude, sharing gratitude, built a whole app to help people with gratitude. And it is something that I came across that I I didn't think made any difference and it changed my life, which is why I changed my career to do it. And what you're sharing is something I often find as people say it's kind of awkward. Like I work with leaders and I teach them to express gratitude to their teams. And they often say, like, it feels really weird.
Mm,
But as soon as you do it, you realize how beautiful it is, how
mm.
amazing, because it makes someone day. Yeah, I recommend all your books, but I really recommend this one to our listeners. It really, like I said, I'm not exaggerating. Like it's really made me think um, of what you just said. Like how many people are involved in just creating the experience that I get to have in my life?
Well, thank you. That is lovely. I mean,
There's,
I think of it all the time too. Like even right now, I'm grateful that you reached out to me. So I'm grateful to your parents. You wouldn't exist without them.
that's right.
And even though your mom put pig lard on your cheeks when you went out in the cold in Russia, you were just telling me for those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Natalie's telling me about her childhood.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
we're grateful for that because if she didn't, I'd be sitting here with cracks in my cheeks because that's how cold
yeah,
it was.
you have
Yeah.
lovely skin. Thanks to
Well,
your
thank
mom.
you, AJ. I'll have to thank my
Absolutely.
mom. So I have to ask you, well, first a little confession. And if my husband Avi was home, he'd pop in here and tell you, yeah, she's definitely said that. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit envious of you because I love this idea of doing these life experiments as you've done. So I've always, whenever you have a new book out, I'm like, oh, what a great idea. But I
Thank
want
you.
to know where did that come from? Like you call yourself a human guinea pig. Did you wake up one day and decide, okay, I'm just going to do all these experiments? Like where did that call from inside of you come from for you to kind of try living all these different ways? Because most people, like the brain likes familiarity and it likes the
Right.
safety of the familiar. So where did that come from in you?
That's a great question. I guess part of it has to do with curiosity. Curiosity is, I'd say, tied with gratitude as my favorite human drive or
Mm.
emotion. And I've always been curious ever since I was a kid. And I love, I just wrote a Substack essay about the phrase curiosity. Don't get curious. Don't get furious, get
I'm
curious.
curious. Yeah.
So don't get, which I love, not just because it rhymes, but because I do think it's meaningful. So I've always loved curiosity. I've always loved, well, I shouldn't say I always love writing. Writing can be very painful. It's not very fun, but I like the idea of writing. I like the
Mhm.
coming up with ideas and researching and then talking about it later. The actual sitting in front of a screen and typing, not so fun.
I'm with you. I've written 3 books. I'm with you. I
Right?
actually, no one's ever put it quite that way. I love coming up with the idea. I love like putting it all together. I love sharing it. I love
Yeah.
talking about it. It's that in the middle part that's very painful.
It's just the writing part of being a writer
Yeah.
that is unpleasant. But writing teachers always said, write what you know, write about your life. I did not have that exciting a life, which I'm in many ways grateful for. I didn't grow up in Russia like you. I grew up in New York, and my parents are lovely, but they aren't spies or carnival workers. And so I figured if I'm going to write about my own experience, I should maybe try and do something interesting or weird or unexpected, and then write about what I learned, write about that experience. So I did that. That became my MO, and I wrote a book. My first book was about reading the encyclopedia from A to Z and trying to learn everything in the world, which I subsequently forgot 99% of
I
it.
was going to ask, well, let's talk about that book because that was
Yeah.
your first experiment. Okay, I just have to tell you, I hope this doesn't come off rude, but when I remember you talking about it or reading something, I was like, do you not just get really bored? Like at some point, like, do you not be like, oh my God, like,
Oh
do you
no,
not?
listen, there were plenty of times there, I no offense against Portuguese literature, but I didn't need 32 pages on Portuguese literature. But there was enough fascinating information to keep me going, because it's everything in the world, and I think the world is fascinating and far weirder and more surprising than you can imagine.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love about your next book, which was the Year of Living Biblically, and actually I was watching everyone should check it out. You have a TED Talk about it. So I want to ask you because I want you to talk about it. I think you talk about this in your TED Talk. So first of all, please describe for our listeners who may not have read the book what you did to live biblically.
Well, yes, just briefly, this came about because I grew up in a very secular home. I'm Jewish like you are, but
Yeah.
I'm Jewish in the same way the Olive Garden is Italian, is how I that's how I put it in the
Love that.
book. Yeah, so not very, but I thought this is an interesting what I want to explore religion. I want to figure out what if anything I can take from it. What if how it'll change my life, and uh, and I thought one way to experience it would be to follow in the footsteps of our ancestors and actually try to follow the Bible as literally as possible. So I did everything. I got a board of spiritual advisors. So I had rabbis and ministers and priests. And then I tried to follow every one of the rules or suggestions in the Bible, and there are hundreds. So I wanted to follow the famous ones, like the Ten Commandments and love your neighbor, but also all of those lesser known kind of obscure laws, like you cannot shave the corners of your beard. I didn't know where the corners were, so I just ended up looking like Gandalf and grew the whole thing. You cannot wear clothes made of two different types of fabric. That's in Leviticus. So I get
Really?
rid of my
Oh, well, I'm
polycotton. Yeah.
sinning all the way. Okay.
You were in trouble. So yes, it was a bizarre. And in the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, it says you shall stone adulterers. So I did try that with some small stones, like pebbles, so no one got genuinely hurt. But it was a wild and weird and absurd year. But at the same time, I took away many profound and life changing lessons. So I love that balance between absurdity and hopefully a little bit of profundity.
Well, can you share a few? Because I want to ask you the question that's in the back of my mind. I want to ask you which kind of commandment was the most challenging, but I'd love to hear what are the profound lessons you took away.
Sure. Well, one certainly was gratitude, because
Mm.
gratitude is a big theme in the Bible. Another is I was tasked with trying to do a moral makeover. So that was, like you mentioned, in the Ten Commandments, it says you should not lie or gossip or covet. And I live in New York City and work as a journalist. So that's like 80% of my day. So
Wow.
what do I do? So one of the most effective methods that I found in trying to be a better person was to pretend to be a better, but the acting as if, the whole fake it till you feel it. And I find this to be a theme throughout all of my books, but especially with the Bible one, I had to, like, it says that you should care for others, think about those who are less fortunate. So I had a friend in the hospital. I hate hospitals. I was like, I'm not going to go, but the Bible would tell me to go. So I forced myself to go. And while I was at the hospital, I was like, wow, I'm at the hospital. I must be a pretty compassionate guy. And if you act enough as if you are something, eventually your mind catches up and you actually start to become that. And that is one of the big themes in ancient and modern psychology.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's cognitive behavioral psychology talks a lot about that. Acting,
Right.
your behavior affects your mind. But it goes back. There's a phrase in Judaism, the deed before creed, which means you act in a certain way and then you start to believe. So it is, I think, a profound
That is
and
really
lasting
profound.
lesson.
There's actually also in I think it's in the Vedas from yoga. I learned it through yoga. This idea that you don't have that it's the same deed before creed. But for example, like one of the examples it talks about is do something kind. You don't have to feel kind towards the person. You do not have to
Right.
feel any kind of emotion. You just have to do the kind thing. And as you do the kind thing, the emotion will follow. So yoga is very clear. Like you don't
Interesting.
have to feel it. You do not have
Right.
to feel forgiveness before you forget. Like you just do it and you will catch up to it.
So
And
interesting.
I love that you brought that up, AJ. You know, in my work, uh, and whenever I try to describe what I do, I always remember my grandpa and my grandma. They came with us. They lived actually, my grandpa only died 4 years ago. So I had grandparents for a very long time. I was very lucky. And they, poor them, they always struggled with what I do because I can't seem to do a traditional thing like you. So I was just about to say what I do and they came to my mind. But, you know, I guess I'm in the business of human transformation. I help people take action on what will cause them to thrive, right? And so often what blocks us is, well, I'm not confident enough. I can't do this. Who am I to do this? And my whole methodology is that it's, well, you can't feel confident to do something new. All you can do is take a step and then another step. And then eventually your brain feels confident because guess what? You're doing the thing. So it's kind of what
Right.
you're saying. It's
Oh,
actually,
it's very much like we are very similar in our outlook.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah.
love that.
And I love that that was something that you took away, I mean, from the Bible, from scriptures, from ancient traditions, because I think often we forget, right? We have these, you know, modern ideas and we forget that many of them are rooted very deeply, long,
Yeah.
long, thousands of years ago, and maybe they have a lot of credence. What was the hardest? I mean, you talked about not gossiping and not coveting. What actually, can I ask you? So the coveting one is troubling. Coveting, what does that mean? Like you really, like, what does it mean to not covet?
Well, it depends who you talk to. Some
Okay.
people say that coveting just means uh, that you want your neighbor's Jaguar and you will take it from them.
Got it.
Others are stricter and say coveting means just wanting anything more than what you have and you should be satisfied with what you have. I don't think that that is
That's
necessarily a
extreme.
sin. Yeah, because it's okay to want something. I think the danger is when you get on this what hedonic treadmill or
Yeah.
whatever the idea that I want X uh, and I fight for it. And as soon as I get it, 30 seconds later, I'm like, no, I liked it for a while, but I'm not satisfied. Now I want Y. That's a dangerous thing to be in. But just wanting something and working for it, I mean, that's human nature. I don't think that we can
Yeah, that's
criticize it.
why I asked about that because that's, I mean, that's literally expansion, right? Like we're
Right.
here, our brain, that's how our brain wants. It wants something, we work towards it, it gets it, it does the next thing. But yeah,
But you have to balance it. You can't be unhappy so unhappy that you're always focused on the next thing. You have to appreciate what you have, which is what gratitude is all about. This
That's right.
idea of realizing the hundreds of good things that happen every day, as opposed to focusing on the three or four that you don't have. So yeah, it is a balance, and uh,
Yeah.
and so I think I learned to balance a little more thanks to that project.
What do you think? Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think? Well, learning to balance that, um, w- in what way do you feel you might have evolved or changed as a result of doing that?
Well, I think yeah, I mean that the idea of gratitude led to my gratitude book, because I would, the Bible talks about being grateful for everything in your life. So I would take that literally, since that's my book. So I would get in, press the elevator button, and be grateful the elevator came,
Mm.
even though they didn't have elevators back then. I'd get in the elevator. I'd be thankful it didn't plummet to the basement and break my collarbone. And doing that was that was a good way to fight this urge to covet and
Mm.
always be looking for more.
Did you annoy everyone around you being overly grateful? I'm asking because I did when I first really started to like embody gratitude. I mean, I really annoyed everyone because every little thing, especially like my family, my daughter, I'd be like, just pause and be great. It was like, in a good way, but it's a beautiful way to be annoying.
That is hilarious. Yeah, well, I annoyed my family in many ways, not only that one. I mean, there was the parts in the Bible that I'm sure you know about, the purity laws, that you cannot, according to Leviticus, you can't touch a woman when she's menstruating. And if you take Leviticus really literally, uh, a woman, when she's menstruating, when she sits in a seat, the seat becomes impure. So my wife found that offensive. So she sat in every seat in our apartment, and just to get back at me. So I had to stand for the rest of the year, or sit on these little stools that I bought. And I did learn later, when I did a book about health, that standing is healthier. So in that sense, I think she did me a favor.
That is hilarious. I did know about that. I didn't remember it, but that good for her. Good for her. I support. Tell her I support.
I
Well, let's talk
will.
about the health, the drop dead healthy. When you try to do all kinds of exercise regimens and posture things and well, actually, let me ask you, like, of the three experiments, right? The smartest person living biblically, drop dead healthy, which was the hardest?
That's a good well, physically, the health one was the hardest, because, I had to go on these fasts. I had to do these workouts where caveman workouts, were like climbing trees in Central Park. So physically, the hardest. Mentally, the hardest, uh, maybe reading the encyclopedia, because I was reading for like 7 hours a day, and that
Wow.
is hard on the brain.
Wow.
But in terms of like changing my worldview, and really having a massive effect on my the way I see things, maybe the Bible one,
Mm,
just because. So I don't know. They were hard in different ways, I guess, is my answer,
yeah. Yeah.
non-answer answer.
What was the most fun part of the drop dead healthy? Like, I know you said it was challenging. What was the fun part of it?
The fun part, well, that's a great question. I mean, I did annoy my wife, so I don't know if she would find it fun, because I tried to do everything, change everything in my life, even the way I went to the bathroom. So as you might know, like crouching is much healthier
Yes.
for you,
Yes.
squatting. So I bought, this is before the squatty potty. So they used to sell these things that turned your first world bathroom into sort of a developing nations. It was like a big wooden platform with a hole in it that you could
Wow.
put over your toilet. So I did that, and my wife got rid of that after a couple of days. So, but in terms of fun, I would say I did a mini triathlon, not a real one, but a mini triathlon. And that was
Wow.
not fun at the end, but certainly the feeling of having done it was fun, much like
Yeah.
writing. much like writing.
Yes.
Uh, so that was fun. Also, just learning. Oh, speaking of gratitude, being grateful for modern medicine. I mean, you
Mm,
read about the history of medicine, and it is horrible. Just three. Here's one little mantra I have that when I get down, I sometimes say to myself, surgery without anesthesia. So until the last 150 years, if you were going to have
that's
surgery,
right.
they would just come in and do it. And I mean, that reading first person narratives of what that was like will
Wow.
make you happy for
Yeah.
modern
The
medicine
trouble
with
we
all its
don't have.
problems.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
can only imagine. I can only imagine. AJ, as we're talking, what I'm thinking about, so this podcast and the work I do, I really try to, activate or invite people to imagine what is possible in their lives beyond where they are and then follow whatever is pulling at them to go in that direction. But it's hard, right? Like the brain doesn't want to do it. There's a lot of self doubt. There's a lot of, who am I to do this? There's a lot of, well, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to do it. And you've become kind of this master of change. So I'd love to hear like what insights or advice or perspectives you can offer to people who, I'm not saying they want to do a year-long experiment, but they want to make a shift. Maybe there's in their career, in their life, but they're just stuck. They're either overwhelmed just thinking about it, or they're like, I'm not going to be able to figure that out, so just forget it. Because that's where I see a lot of people sort of give up really quickly and just stay where they are.
right. Well, I first of all, I still struggle all the time with change. It is hard. Uh, some of the strategies I found useful include breaking things down into mini goals. So, for the health, for instance, I wrote a lot of it on a treadmill. I have a treadmill desk, which I'm looking at right now. I'm not on it now because I don't want to be heavy breathing and have your listeners think I'm creepy. But I did. I would I would break it down into mini goals. Like,
Mm,
all right, I'm going to put on my sneakers. I'm not gonna guarantee that I'm gonna get on the treadmill, but let me just put on my sneakers. And then once I did that, I had a little momentum. I said, okay, all right, I'm going to get on the treadmill for 2 minutes. That's all. I'm not promising myself anymore. But once you're on, you're like, well, I'm here. Let me just stay on for 10, 15 minutes. And I find that very helpful
mm,
as a way. You got to break it down. Because if I said, even writing a book, I'd say, I'm going to write a book. That is so daunting. I, I say, no, I'm going to write, 10 essays. I'm going to break it down into 10 little parts and then see if I can weave them together. And
mm.
that is for me, a much more manageable way to look at a big project. So
It's a
that's
good
one.
way to trick our brain,
Right.
so instead of telling the brain, I'm going to do this big thing, and it goes, no, 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 you can't do it, it's too hard, right? Because, well, this, of course, because you're the master, but change is very expensive for the brain. The brain has to allow a lot of extra energy, so it's going to do anything possible to prevent us from doing it. So it's kind of like, I always think of these mini goals as a way to sort of slow on ramp. Like, that's fine, we're just going to put on sneakers. It's kind of like, I'm remembering when my daughter Mia was little, and it was kind of like that. Like, the kids, they hate sudden big things, right? Like,
Right.
no. So it was like, hey, do you want to put on your sneakers? Like, hey, do you want to put on your jacket? Like, hey, do you want to grab a snack? Oh, we're going outside. Okay. But I'm already dressed and I already got my snacks. So I'm like, yeah, I think
I
it's,
love that because I think I sometimes look at my brain as a child.
that's how
And
I talk about it in my books. The brain is a
oh,
little child. That's
I
who it
got
is.
to read your books. We
Yeah.
definitely think alike.
Well,
Yeah.
that's 100%. That's what I think the brain. If you think about your brain, like for listeners, right now, think about, first of all, how many thoughts you've had that have nothing to do with this conversation. Right, the brain. 50% of the time, our brain is thinking about something other than what we're doing.
Really?
Yeah.
I am focused on you right now, man.
Well,
So
me
just want to
too, AJ. But like, that's what the brain does. Think about how many times our brain changes direction or moods, right? It's like a little
yeah.
child. Like, I remember when Mia was 5 years old, like, I go into her room, everything is fine. And then I go get a snack, and somehow there's not fine and something is very wrong and she wants to play with this toy, but then this toy, right? That's what a kid is. So I
Right.
often say that, the brain is a little child and we have to act like a nice grandparent, not a parent, but a grandparent, because I think
Uh-huh.
grandparents have this really beautiful approach of like, okay, they don't yell, they don't get angry, but they're like, okay, I understand, but let's try this little thing, right? Let's try small steps, and then you're running on the treadmill.
That is so funny. I love that. Well, I think of it in the same way that, especially when I'm not talking to you, when I'm just like, wandering around, I feel that my brain has a tendency to go down dark alley. Like it'll start thinking about worst case scenarios. It'll think about someone who insulted, the straightness of my teeth 6 months ago in a YouTube comment. Like, and that is, to me, that's like a child just wandering into the worst parts. So yeah, you have to gently guide it back, as you say,
That's right.
to
Well,
like,
so just to geek out, so I study neuroscience for fun. For me, the brain is really fascinating. But I think it's very helpful to understand how our brain works so then we can shift it. But what you just described, right, when we're not busy, our default modal network kicks in. It's all
mm,
these regions of your brain. And that's like the positive parts of it. That's where creative ideas come from. That's why we get ideas in the shower, because when we're not focused in our frontal cortex and our executive function, the different parts of the brain, the default modal network, they start connecting ideas.
mm,
And so that's why in the shower, we're like, oh, an idea. So that's the positive side. The downside of that network is rumination.
mm.
And because the brain has a negativity bias, always negative rumination, self-criticism. So I think it's always good, like when we catch ourselves, to like be that grandparent, be like, hey, why don't you come over here instead and let's play this game or let's have a snack. Um,
Yeah, great. I love it.
what's your next experiment, AJ?
Well, I have a couple things going on. One, my book, I wrote a book a couple of years ago about my love of puzzles, especially word puzzles, sort of like Wordle and Spelling Bee and crossword puzzles. And that spun off into a podcast where I give puzzles to our guests. And I love that because I think puzzles are not trivial. I think that they teach us how to keep our brains flexible and find solutions and be creative. So I'm a big fan. And I give audio puzzles. So for instance, one that we do is I'll say a word in a certain intonation or accent, and it's a clue to a two-word phrase. So if I said, for instance, tide, then that means rising tide. Or if I said banana, then that is banana split because it's banana split. So
Oh,
so it teaches
fascinating.
you to think creatively, to think
Yeah.
out of the box, which is a cliche that came from puzzles. The original think out of the box is a puzzle where you have 9 dots and you have to connect it with 3 pencil lines. You know that one, and
Uh-huh.
you actually
Yeah.
have to go outside of the box to solve it. So anyway, I'm doing that, and then I have like 4 or 5 ideas for books that my agent actually likes 3 of them. So, which is a much higher, usually I think in life, you come up with 100 ideas and like 3 of them are okay. Uh, but I guess, you know what, in retrospect, I probably came up with 300 ideas and these are like the one or two, 3 or 4 that actually have stuck with me. So I'm working on that. One of them has to do with a book that I actually started a couple of years ago, but it was so daunting that I kind of gave it up, put it on the back burner, but I might return to it. It's all about misinformation and disinformation,
Ooh,
which I feel is very
that's
timely.
very
It
in the
was
moment.
timely then. Yeah, it was timely then and now. So
Yeah.
it was all about fact checking my life. How do I know the world is round? How do I know my wife loves me? How do I know
Oh,
how do I know that
that
you
is
are real and
that
not
is
just a
fascinating. That is, well, there's something you said that I just want to go back to for a moment, because I think that's another part of change and transformation. And, you said, oh, I've probably done 300 ideas, and these were the 3 and 4 that kind of rose to the top. I think that's another thing that is really important. I'd love to hear you talk about it. When we in life, right, we might feel stuck or unfulfilled. And there's a sense that a lot of people have. I used to have it because I used to be I used to be in tech. I ran tech companies and did very different things from what I do now because I was doing the things I thought I should do to
Mm,
build my American dream. I actually never asked myself what I wanted to do. But I think we have the sense that there's this one path in life, right? And I got to
mm,
find the right path. And a lot of people tell me, like when I work with them, I don't know what my path is. I haven't found my path. And I'm of the opinion, and I'd love your thoughts on this, that there isn't one path. There's
mm.
infinite number of possible ways, and we have to try. That's the only way to figure it out is we have to try. So I'd love your thoughts on this, because even just what you said about your books and your ideas, 300 hundreds, and then you get to one. So I'd love your thoughts on this kind of one path in life versus many possibilities.
Oh, I'm with you 100%. And I love your point that we have to experiment. Uh, and there is this, I'm sure you've heard of the book Range by, have you heard of that?
I read it.
Now,
Dave, I'm
yeah,
horrible with names. I'm
I
blanking on
am
the author.
too, but it's very good. And that
Good
is
book,
one,
everyone. Look it up.
his thesis is that yes, we in careers we tried you most people find happiness by trying, especially when you're young, try a bunch of different things and see. But why should it only be when you're young? I mean, if you can financially afford to experiment, which I know is a privilege. But if you can, then just keep on experimenting. And I mean, I feel the same. And when I've told this to my wife, so if she's listening, she knows that I love her, but I don't believe in a soulmate. I don't think, I mean, there's a crazy concept that there's one person among 8 billion who is your soulmate. So I don't believe in soulmates. Nor do I believe in career soulmates. Like
Mm.
we are, it's very similar. Like you say, you can find fulfillment in all sorts of different careers, and the more experimenting, in my opinion, the better.
And I think also to your point, experimenting, it doesn't have to mean, and I work with a lot of people like in a mentorship, like I do these small groups or one-on-one. And I think there's this all or nothing mindset, like, well, I can't
Mm,
afford to leave my job, so I'm not going to do it. But I don't think it has to be all or nothing. Like, as an example, one of my clients that I work with, her name is Kate. She's an executive at a big tech company doing something, but she's not entirely fulfilled by it. And when we started working together, she told me that she's always had this dream to have a candy store because she has these great memories from her childhood of going with her friends and getting like a little brown bag of candy for like 10 cents and just a lot of warmth. And she's like, I don't know how to run a business. I don't even know. So I've just dismissed it for 20 years. And I'm in the business of not letting people dismiss their dreams. So I said, no, we got to figure out how to try it. So now I said, why don't you just try it as a pop up at your house? And so now we actually have a date and she's making all kinds of plans and we're working together to create a pop up of her candy store in her house in May. And we've come up with all these cool things about it. And it's a great way to experiment with that dream. If she does it, she might decide
right.
a couple pop-ups is fulfills that need, or she might say, you know what, I really want to do more, right? And that's why I think also not thinking about things like all or nothing, like that's why I reached out to you, like to run an experiment. Just
Yeah. Well,
experiment.
that I love that, and I agree. Um, I often say to people, I'm an evangelist for experimenting with your life. I get paid. I have a book contract, so I can go all in. But it doesn't have to be like that. You can do an experiment, like try 1 week of not gossiping. It could be little small things. Try a different toothpaste every month for a year and see what you like. Any tweak, I think. Uh, as you say, there's a little bit of a mental cost because it is easier to be in a rut. But I think the happiness that you'll gain outweighs the cost. I think that it, I think getting out of these mental ruts uh, is good for you. It's good for your creativity, but it's also good for your happiness.
Well, AJ, I have no filter, so I'm just gonna tell you. So I have had for a couple of years this little idea. I'm like you. I have a book. I have so many ideas for so many things, and I just write them all down. I don't know, I'm looking for it. Like I have so many journals around me into which I write all these ideas because for things, companies, books. And one of the ideas I've had for a while now is to do a year of week-long experiments to help
Oh,
people get unstuck. Because
yeah.
the number one thing I hear is I'm in a rut, I'm unfulfilled, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, I'm not going to change my career. So I've had this idea to write this book of like 52 experiments for a week of different things. And now talking to you, I'm going to bug you. That might be a book for us to collaborate on
Oh, yeah.
because I come at it from the mental health and thriving, and I've worked with people and companies, and you're so great at these experiments. So I'm just throwing it out there. Like I said, I have no filter. As you're talking, I'm like, we should collaborate on this book of
That
week
could be a
long
lot of
52
fun.
experiments to get unstuck because it's
Let's
this.
talk. Let's
I
talk.
think
I
we
think
should
it's an
talk about
interesting
it
idea.
because that's what your work has inspired in me. I just want to tell you, like from the first book that I read the gratitude book first and then the others, um, is like to me as humans, we're meant to expand and grow. That's what life is. But sometimes I think we think of it in this all or nothing, like I got to change careers or I got to move. And then if we can't do that thing, we just give up. But no, it could just be, like you said, not gossiping for a week or, eating only vegetable, whatever it is. Like it
Right.
could be, or for a week you work towards your dream. That's actually something I do with my clients. If they come to me and they say, I've always wanted to write a book, one of the things we do is I have them for 2 weeks. So I used to be in tech. And in tech, there's this concept. I don't know if you ever heard of agile development.
No, what does it mean?
So agile development is actually, it's fascinating. So the way that tech products used to be built is somebody like a product person they would plan out all the features. Okay, we're going to build this product, and they spend like a year planning out all the features, and then they spend a year building it, and then they release it.
Hmm.
That used to be called the waterfall method. And then agile development came in, and agile says, we don't know what the customer wants. We need to
Interesting.
learn. And so
Right.
agile development is iterative. And it runs on these sprints. So you have a 2-week sprint. It's a core component. And so you decide, here's the feature we're going to build for the next 2 weeks. We're going to focus on this one feature. And then you build it and then you release it. And you learn how people are using it, and then you iterate. So it's very iterative. It's much faster, more
Interesting.
dynamic. But
Right.
this core element of agile development, and I ran these teams for different companies, is you have this 2-week sprint. And so you commit to the goal, like by the
Yes.
end, like you did with your mini goals, you have a goal. And then for 2 weeks, and every day you do what's called a stand up. And the stand up is you literally stand with your team because you can't sit because then you're going to be too talky. And
Right.
everyone goes around and they say, here's what I got done yesterday. Here's what I'm doing today. Here's anything that's blocking me. And so it has this great accountability, specificity.
Yeah.
So I use that in my work. So when I work with leaders or I do my mentorship groups, we do these sprints. And so when someone says to me, oh, I've been wanting to write a book or start a candy shop, I said, great, let's run a 2-week sprint.
Mm.
Figure out what you can get done by the end of 2 weeks. And then every single day you take an action. Could be a small step. And the amazing thing, AJ, is it's really transformative because you know what happens a lot? I'm sure this happened to you. Very often people at the end of the 2-week sprint, they're like, actually, I don't want to write this book. I
Interesting.
just like the
Right.
idea.
Which
And
is a
often
very good lesson. Yeah.
which is awesome because then you don't have to have the weight of this dream that I've never, but very often people will run the experiment and they get so energized. They're like, okay, what's the next 2-week goal? What's the next 2-week goal? So
Right.
to me, doing things in this 1 or 2-week experiments, it alleviates the resistance from the brain.
Right.
And it allows you to build momentum. And you the person that I know of who's kind of done this for a living.
Well, thank you, Natalie. I love that idea. And it reminds me, last year, the New York Times asked me to write an article on living a month without using anything plastic, a month without plastic. And when I researched it, I said, you know what? A month is way too long. I can get the point across. I can learn this lesson in a day. And so it became a day without plastic because when I researched it, plastic is so omnipresent. From the moment I woke up and put my feet on the floor, the carpet has plastic. I open the doorknob has a plastic coating. I brush my teeth, the tube is plastic. There's plastic in the toothpaste. So it was uh, a lesson, and you don't always need a year or a month or even a week. Sometimes you can do a mini experiment in a day.
In a day. Well, I love that. And I think the other thing that I guess the last thing I'll ask you, one of the things that just came to mind is all of these experiments, it feels like they've really like amplified your awareness. Like
I
even just the
feel
awareness of there's plastic everywhere, or, that you could be grateful in an elevator.
right. Well, I do. That is the goal of all of them, is to be more aware, more mindful, more present. And I do think, like we talked about, one of the greatest insights is that I should not always trust my brain. Like you
Mm.
said, I love your idea of the grandparents uh, taking care of the brain. The brain was evolved to survive on the savannah. It was not evolved to make me fulfilled and happy and a kind and compassionate person. So I should I I should not trust every thought that I have. I shouldn't trust every feeling that I have. I should be a little more aware and and sometimes treat my brain like the child that it is. So you and I are very much aligned on that.
I love that. I love that. Well, AJ, I could talk to you for hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you. I really, you're a busy person, and I really appreciate you making the time. And I really appreciate the, something I find in your writing and confirmed by this conversation, just the humanness that you bring into everything you do. It comes through your words. It comes through this conversation. I'm really grateful to have had a chance to meet you. I hope it's not the last time. Thank you.
I would love to keep in touch, and right back at you. I feel the humanness, and I love your story. I want to hear more stories about your childhood in Russia with or without pig lard. So yes, look forward to continuing the relationship.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you, as always. If you're listening, thank you for letting me be in your ear. And if you're watching, appreciate you tuning in. As I like to say, I will be in your ear next week with our next episode. Have an awesome day, everyone.